Go ahead, Mike.
We're live. Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're on the sleepy West Coast. And welcome to the Analog Productions Acoustic Sounds webinar on the UHQR reissue of Kind of Blue. It's a big deal. It was a big deal when it was first released back in the 50s, and that record is still a big deal. And this UHQR version is also a big deal. We have some really knowledgeable people here along with me. I'm doing the best I can. So we have Michael Hobson, who reissued this the first time in the 90s, and he's going to talk about that part of this, along with whatever else he can bring to the table, which is a lot. It'll be a feast. And then we have Chad Kassem, who has done this reissue, along with Gary Salstrom, who is the master of plating, the plating master. He has a lot on his plate these days, too, so it's good that he's normally, Chad has him chained to that fine build press, but he's taken the chain off so that he can come talk to us, which is good. And Michael Ludwigs is in Germany, and he is an expert on the subject as well, and has a very good YouTube channel with some very interesting information, and he will be speaking about this as well. And also Bernie Grundman, who is really key to this entire operation, since he's the one who cut the lacquers that produce the metal parts. But Bernie's smoke signals went out, and they're lighting the fire up again. He's got the rug ready. As soon as the smoke starts rising, he'll be with us. But for now, he's not here. So, Michael, why don't you take it away and explain your part of this whole process?
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to say how nice it is to see everybody on this, and I want to thank Chad for putting this together. It's really a bit of a reunion for me, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing Grundman. I haven't actually seen him in a number of years now, having sold classic records to Chad in 2010. You know, I kind of exited the music business at that point and have been doing other things water related since then. So that's another story. We're here to talk about Kind of Blue. And, you know, classic records started in really in the beginning of 1994, the first releases coming out from the RCA Living Stereo catalog that year. And I think we put out close to 10 records that year. And so that would be 1994. And then later in that year, we started putting out some Verve titles from the Verve catalog. And then it was sort of time to, you know, continue to branch out. There was a lot of competition. You know, I had to try my best to stay ahead of Chad, which wasn't that easy back in those days, nor would it be these days, which is why I ended up selling to him anyway, because he was going to overtake me. So you might as well, you know, give up while you're at the top, so to speak. But anyway, I was based in New York at the time, even though Classic Records was in Los Angeles. And as I've mentioned to people before, the reason for that was that all the activity was out here. In other words, cutting, plating, and at that time, pressing at RPI, which all the audiophile companies did, was out in Los Angeles. So, but living in the East Coast and actually visiting Fremer more often those days than I get a chance to these days, and I kind of miss that. But it gave me access to the major record labels that were all based in New York City. And in particular, you know, at 550 Madison, which is where Sony Columbia was based. And I got to know the folks there, and in particular, a guy called David Waldman, who is really an important piece to this puzzle. He was the director of business affairs at that time, and also a trained cellist and accomplished guitarist as well. And so I went in to see David and sat in his office that, you know, was filled with music and so forth, a real music lover, but also an LP lover as well. And having reissued these wonderful living stereos and these Verve titles, my pitch to them was, well, you know, we want to do the same classic touch to, you know, some great things in the Columbia catalog. And so, of course, I was there fishing for Kind of Blue, and I brought Kind of Blue up. And a sort of funny story is that he said, well, you know, in order to get Kind of Blue, we'll have to go and see Peter Schukat. And Peter Schukat's a big high-end attorney, or was at that time, in New York City, and among others represented Miles Davis's estate, as well as Jimi Hendrix and many others, I should say. I think even John Lennon. Hey, Mr. Grundman.
Hey, Bernie.
Hey, how are you?
Finally made it.
I've never been so happy to see Bernie.
Hey,
yeah, well, you
Grundman,
know, the train just got in. You know, the train just got here, and I just got off the train. You can see.
Is that Piccadilly? Is that Paddington Station in London,
That's
or is that in
Cologne.
Paris?
That's in Germany.
That's Cologne.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's great. It's behind me in my kitchen.
That's
Hey,
fantastic.
we're so happy to see you.
You know,
Well,
all the rest of us geeks have records behind us, like, you know, that's something of, you know, and of course you
Well, I
turn.
wanted to do something different. I figured that would happen.
Well, I
Hey,
appreciate
when
it.
Bernie goes home, he wants to go home. He's seen enough.
Exactly.
10 hours, maybe
So
12.
anyway, Bernie, I was just as we were waiting on you to show up, and I was telling the story about how Kind of Blue got licensed, and I was at the point of telling about David Waldman, who said to me that we had to go and see Peter Schukat, who represented Miles Davis's estate, in order to license his title. And he said that probably will take a little while, and it ended up doing that, not too long. But the funny part of the story is that while I was there, he said, "Well, you know, while we're working on that, how would you like to do Dave Brubeck Time Out?"
Oh,
And I thought for about, you know, I just stood there kind of paralyzed. I sat
like
there
5 seconds.
and I said to him, I said, "Yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah, well, yeah, sure."
No kidding.
And actually, I think that's the first title that we did.
It is the first title, and it's the first time I think we really did something different than all of the original releases and so forth. We went right back to the original 3-track,
Right.
and we were able to master directly to the lathe from the 3-track and mix it on my mastering board and add our reverb, because, you know, the Dave Brubeck Take 5 was on the master, the 3-track, that nice romantic kind of reverb on Paul Desmond is not there.
Yeah.
But we have at our studio 3 EMT chambers, and those are the chambers that were used on almost everything in the 50s and 60s and so forth for reverb. And so we were able to, duplicate it exactly, except we could remix it and with less electronics and so forth, and go direct to the lathe. So it was like quality-wise, it would be superior because they had done all those mix downs and so forth, and it was just on 1/4 inch. This was a 1/2 inch 3-track master, session master, and
Yeah,
so was Kind of Blue. So was Kind of Blue.
Yeah. So to add to what Bernie's saying, as I mentioned earlier, we had already under our belt, I think, at least a dozen RCA living stereos, most of which were 3-tracks. There were a couple of exceptions.
Yeah, we did some really important recordings, like the Brahms Violin Concerto by Jascha Heifetz.
Right. But we had experience with 3-track tapes, and generally what would happen is, you know, you'd put this 3-track up, and, you know, Bernie had the tape returner or whatever that he would mix the 3rd channel between the other 2. And it was, you know, we would put an original copy of the record on, or multiples of same, different stampers and so forth, to try to gauge what they did originally in the 3-to-2 mix. And, you know, of course, we call Grundman, by the way, in case people don't know, his other name is the Wizard. And so he would just really hone in on it. And we had a lot of experience. You know, I mean, I can't speak for Bernie, but I can speak for myself. You know, I was kind of cocky at that point and thought, well, we got this, you know. So this Brubeck tape, so I'm going to spend just a minute talking about it, and you'll see why in just a minute. We put this up, and I'll never forget, you probably remember too, he pushed play, and, you know, he's got the center channels kind of in the normal area where it would be, and with some adjustment coming. And both of us sat in the old studio on Sunset and didn't say anything. We were like, uh-oh. did we get the wrong tape? What's going on here? Because compared with any LP or any representation of that wonderful title, this thing was dry. It was unexciting. If you had cut that flat off the tape without anything else, I mean, people would have been disappointed, and we probably would have gone out of business. It was awful.
Well, yeah. One of the objects of a lot of this, and there's a lot of purists around that don't like anything done. But the problem is, in order to create the best experience of the music, you really, one of the main things is, and any good mix is this way, is that you want to create a nice sound stage and an environment where you can transport those listeners to some special place where they're more intimate with that music. And that there's nothing wrong with some of that. In fact, most recordings have some sort of reverb or ambient kind of addition. And so I think the object and what you're also talking about is that for all of these recordings and all of the things we did, which was about 500 albums, all of these things we were comparing to what was out before, and we were trying to capture like what was valuable about those and just make it better. Right. Cleaner, and just a bigger experience of the same thing that everyone knows.
Right. And I think, Bernie, that's, what our intention was, and that's one of the reasons why I think Classic Records and the relationship with Bernie Grundman Mastering was so good, and it fit so well because everybody was on that same page, and we went through years. Every time we could innovate something or make it better, we did. And I think over time, we did a better job. And I'll just say, in previewing what I think Chad and Gary will talk about, is that they continue that tradition with this remake that has its origins in the classic reissue of it, and you'll understand that intimate connection. It's like a continuation, really, in many ways. Anyway, back to I just want to finish this Dave Brubeck thing. Mm-hmm. So after we were came in our, I looked over at Grundman, and of course, as I said before, being a little cocky, at that time I was completely humbled and went. I kind of looked at him like a little kid and said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And without hesitation, he kind of sat there for a second and he went, "We'll just run it through the plates, upstairs at Ocean Way, of which is where they had their EMT
at that time."
We renovated, he went through one of the plates and did a stereo plate, and we were able to make Kind of Blue in Dave Brubeck in what I think to be its ultimate version. And of course, I'm biased there, but I think other people have judged it as well. The reason I mention all that is because, as crazy as that was, and there was some EQ on the Brubeck record, even on the original and so forth, and we tried to faithfully kind of maintain the perspective, but as Bernie says, to bring more to the party. And I think we successfully did that. So roll the tape forward. So that was in late 1995. I think October of 1995 is when we did Take 5. And so roll the tape forward about a little over a year. In January of 1997 is when the Kind of Blue tapes showed up. Mm-hmm. And again, the 3-track session masters. And they showed up at Grundman Studio. And I have to say, I was very excited. And we went down, and my recollection anyway, and Bernie can add to this, is that we put the tapes up. And I think there was a little bit, we probably didn't say it, but in my mind anyway, there was a little bit of the, oh boy, is this going to be another Brubeck? Well, he put the tape on, as my recollection is, and he hit play again in the same way. And, I could be making this up, but my recollection is we just sat there and listened to the entire first side without saying anything. It just played. And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. Completely flat, without any EQ. It just played, and it was stunning. I still remember that moment.
And now I don't remember. The one interesting thing though about Kind of Blue is that when we first got the tapes, there's no way we could have listened to the whole album, because the interesting thing about this particular album is that we got the session tapes.
Yeah.
The 3-track masters from the session.
Yeah.
They had never been assembled into an album. In other words, nobody had done that. They had done each tune individually and then assembled it on a 1/4 inch as their final master with whatever mixing they wanted to do between 3 channels. You know, you have only 3 channels, but it's mixing.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure whether that listening thing was after I assembled it or what. I'm not sure about how that worked, but I know that the magic about that album, this thing that happens in music where there's something really beyond everyone in the session, and there's a connection that is hard to explain. And I think anyone that's a musician has probably felt this, that it's like you get to this effortless effort thing where it just flows. Everybody's on the same page. How does that happen? I don't know. It's really mysterious. But that session, when I went through all those tapes, the session tapes, there were the takes that were on the album were the only full takes.
Right.
There were not any other, in other words, the full takes were the perfect, there were no splices.
Yeah.
And the only tune, what's it, Blue and Green, or Green and Blue, Blue and Green? The last tune on side 2, I think it is.
Yeah.
That
Which
one,
is all blues.
All blue. That's the only one. No, it's not all. It's
actually, it's Flamenco Sketches is the one that there's an alternative take of.
Okay, whichever one was the alternative take, there was one other full take. Now there were false starts and things like that, but the only ones that were complete were the ones that were used.
Yeah.
But that one had 2 full takes, and the other one that we put on the other side of the second disc wasn't even close.
Right.
Can I ask one question?
So it goes to show you what happens when the musicians are all communicating in such a extremely perfect way or something. It's a magical way. It just kind of flowed.
Yeah.
Bernie, how did these tapes get to your studio from the vault? Did someone hand carry them, or were they mailed to you? How did that work?
I can address that, Michael.
Yeah, Michael would know.
I can address that. The answer is with the record labels, it varied. But I can tell you in this particular case, we were advantaged because 2 things. One, all the record labels also had offices in Los Angeles, right? So there was intercompany movement of tapes and so forth. And so we were able in Sony's case to use that mechanism, which made them feel comfortable. And secondly, when you say to someone, oh, they're going to Bernie Grundman's, they go, oh yeah, that's fine. Just, send them to Grundman's because, every great record, including, Michael Jackson Thriller, was done at Grundman. So, it's not such a big deal to get that.
So
and they kind of know that I'm experienced with tape. I mean, let's face it, I grew up on tape. I've been in this thing 55 years. So it's like, that's all we had for a long time.
So let me.
What shape was the tape in? What condition was the tape in 1995?
Oh, tape was
perfect.
Fine, perfect. I mean, especially that one because it had never been played many times.
No.
The only thing that really breaks down tape is playing it over and over and over and over. Tape, all those early blue notes from the early 50s and stuff like that I mastered, they're perfect. There's
really
nothing wrong. The tape will last longer than anything.
So then what's the story now, not that many years later, where they said the 3-track was almost shot, so we're going to do one last transfer and then put it away and never use it again?
We've heard that before.
Yeah,
that's not always true. But I
really?
think
they lie.
Well, I think here's the thing too. The problem with a lot of tape is that the old machines didn't have constant tension. And so what happened is all of the spooling right by the hub, the beginning of the tape, that's where most of the damage is, because the tape is stored after it's been kind of like wound in a small circumference. For one thing, that's not good, but there's a stress on it because of the pulling of the take-up reel. And so what happens is all of those tunes, the first tune, usually, if anything's going to start having oxide problems, it'll be the first tune because of all that stress it's been under.
Right.
So a lot of times we'll even put a bigger hub on something just so that it plays a little more easily. But sometimes we have to fix the things I've fixed before, and I like to do those kind of things because I like to preserve most of what was original. I'll fix maybe just one tune. Like my biggest example is Nuke's Time by Sonny Rollins.
Mm-hmm.
All they had was a 1/4-inch Dolby A copy of the master, but the left channel kept fading out and coming back in, fading out and coming back in. So it was unusable, except that, I'm a big Sonny Rollins fan. So, I had to do something.
We know that.
I had to do something. I said, look, for posterity, I got to at least have a tape that they can keep, have in their file, not just digital stuff and so forth. So I asked for all of the previous CDs. That's all they had, but of different release periods. And I went through that tape and I reverse engineered the CDs in such a way that I could actually edit a piece of tape made from that into the master, only in the places where it was fading out on the left channel. Wow. It took me 24 hours to do this. But they now have a tape that's continuous and you can't tell where my splices are. But I'm used to fixing things like that. But it's really tedious, but that's part of what we do.
Right. Oh man. So
that's what happens with tape. So these tapes, like the Blue Notes and stuff like that, are stuff way back in the 50s, early 50s. They weren't played a lot. They didn't sell a lot of them. They didn't master them. But fortunately, Thriller's on a 1/2-inch, so it's still good. But some of those other ones that have been run a lot of times are starting to kind of, the oxide is getting to be where there's little particles and stuff start coming off. But for the most part, if anyone wants to archive something to last for, say, 100 years, tape is probably the only thing you can use. Yeah. Because, digital is so dense and so difficult to maintain electronically to create a signal. Anything that is flawed there, it's going to drop out or it's going to get static. So tape it's spread over a wide area on the oxide. So even if you have a little deterioration, tape can last a long time. There's things I've heard tapes, the original tapes that were made in Germany in the late 30s, that were on paperback tape. That was the first tape with oxide on it. Mm-hmm. They still played. Now this was back in the 90s, but they made a CD from those just to commemorate the first stereo recordings that they were made in Germany. And those tapes still played. And they still sounded pretty good.
Wow.
Bernie, most of the 3 tracks though have already been played, right? I mean, like every time we do a 3-track, you hear that they might not even have been used since the day they were recorded. And
that's the good thing about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you can get the 3 tracks, I'm sure they haven't been run many times.
Well,
and I mean, the kind of blue, right, was.
That's right. Those look, they were never assembled. They only used them to mix it down, and that was it. They were done.
So I mean, to me, it sounds like they were pristine and perfect, and now, they ran through it one more time. So we're not sure, did it deteriorate between 97 and now, or they just don't want. I don't think they want to touch. They really. Or trying to say, we don't want to mess with that tape. We did it one more time. We're putting it away.
Yeah,
that's what I think. I don't know that it's as damaged as maybe it sounds. Maybe it is. I don't know. But
they're probably
just saying, we made another transfer. Put that thing back. It's a masterpiece.
Well, they're afraid. A lot of people are afraid of tape anyway. They don't even want to cut tape. The new engineers, if I pull out a razor blade, they go, "You're not going to cut the tape, are you?" I said, "God, how do you think we edited things for decades?"
Oh yeah.
Oh really? Oh really? And they're just like, oh, Because they're used to computers. It's not destructive. Computers aren't really destructive, but tape, you could make a mistake and you've got big trouble.
Yeah.
But I'm used to it, you know, so it doesn't scare me, you know, and that's a big factor. You know, you don't want to be afraid of anything because you probably will make a mistake.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the case. So regardless, the other thing to remember, let's not forget with Kind of Blue, is that they had a backup machine. So there are actually two sets of session masters. And of course, everybody will recall that I think it was for the 25th anniversary of Kind of Blue, if I recall correctly, on CD, that it was discovered that side A was, I think, about an eighth of a tone. It was too fast.
Yeah, it had been mastered at the wrong speed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually what happened, at least that they reported, was that one of the machines was running slightly slow on the A side, right, on those tunes, but the B side apparently was fine, and they discovered that by running the second set of tapes because there were two machines there, and they realized, oh, wait a minute, this A side is wrong. So when they did the 3-to-2 transfer, it was too fast, right? Because if you play a tape that was reported too slow back at the proper speed, it's now sharp.
Yeah, I remember that problem. I remember working on that.
Yeah, so for all time, at least up until that CD reissue, it was too fast. So we had a little bit of a dilemma, and I remember that's part of the reason why it took a year after the Brubeck to get to Kind of Blue, because, you know, my argument to them was, well, we have this dilemma, and that is, if we put it out at the correct speed, which is what they wanted us to do, because, you know, you should do it the right way, so to speak, the way it was originally played.
Yeah, that's a problem.
But it's a problem. And so what we ended up doing, and I have, you know, that copy here, we did this 2-record set, which Bernie's already kind of referred to, right? And it's the front and back cover, and then there's, you know, it's a gatefold, and it's got some pictures and so forth in it that are kind of nice. But we did the first record of the 2-record set was side A. In fact, it says on the label of the record, it says original speed.
Original speed, yeah. The one, it was nice because you wanted to keep the integrity of what everyone's used to. You know, everyone was used to that. And so the album number 1 was the way the album was configured, the speed that it was exactly wrong on side A, but the way it has always been. But because you wanted to be really thorough, you made it into a special package containing a new side A just corrected for speed. Yep. And I remember somebody was in there tuning with tuning forks and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. And we finally got the right speed so that it was on pitch.
Yep.
And then to fill it up, we just put that outtake on the back side.
On the back side at 45 RPM.
Yeah, at 45.
So, you know, and then subsequent releases, of which there are many, right? Because I've got all of them, all these different versions we put out.
Yeah.
And I can talk about that a little later. But the issue was that, you know, we wanted to be able to give people who remember it sharp, and then, but also the corrected speed. So we put it out that way. And I remember, you know, Bernie did VSO, you know, variable speed on the machine, got it right, and we cut it. And, you know, so then I still also remember, I want to share with everybody that we cut this. And one of the things in the spirit of what Bernie's talking about, of doing things the best possible way, early on in the process, Bernie said, well, you know, you really should get these lacquers in the tank as quickly as possible. And so we would generally, most of the time, lacquers get silvered in the morning. That's the way it mostly happens. And so we would cut late in the day, and then I would hand carry the lacquers in the original days down to Greg Lee Plating, and the master plating guy that really Gary fell into the footsteps of was Ed Tobin. And Gary knew Ed really well. And unfortunately, Ed tragically was murdered. And we then, working with RTI, and I think Gary probably remembers this, we helped finance getting RTI's plating up to a standard that was the equivalent of Greg Lee. So I remember when we cut Kind of Blue, we did the same thing. We cut it late in the day, and I kept the lacquers, in this styrofoam container, and I ran them up to RTI, drove them up because Camarillo's about a 50-minute drive with no traffic early in the morning, and I remember handing those lacquers over to Gary, who was, I think, as tickled as I was to to be able to plate these. And so I'm hopeful that Gary remembers some of that and can share with us the plating part of this, and maybe even a part that people don't realize, and that is that with a lot of, almost all, I think in fact most all of our releases, Gary or Ed Tobin actually listened to the mothers and what is called deticked them. So you actually get to listen to the record from the mother while making it a little better. And I actually have never talked to Gary, even though he worked for me as a production manager at Classic Records. I've never really talked to him about the plating of Kind of Blue. So do you have some insight for us, Gary?
Well, yeah, this is bringing a lot of memories back, actually. I remember you bringing the lacquers to me, and I mean, it was pretty amazing. I actually have the original masters, the metal masters right here. January 31st, 1997 was the day that I made the mother, or separated the mother from that master, which means, Bernie, must have cut it the day before, or within a day or so of that. Oh yeah. And I just couldn't believe. And it's amazing that I was a part of that. I also got to play Time Out, which are two of my favorite records that I've ever been involved in. That are just amazing how they sound, and it just, you guys did it all right, and I was honored to be a part of it.
Well, we all come from being audiophiles. We were all audiophiles. Why are we in this business? That's part of it. It's the music and being audiophiles, being just obsessed with sound quality and how it can enhance your experience.
Well, I remember Mike was talking about Ed, who was one of my favorite people. I took over basically for him at Wakefield, even though he was already gone.
That's right.
By the time I got there, I mean, he was the one that basically set everything up and had it the way it needed to be when I got there, and then kind of followed him, with California. Now, when this all happened with just before Mike was talking about setting up a plating facility, I was going to photography school in Santa Barbara because I was looking for something else. I don't know, when we're young, and I don't remember. I think it was Don that called me. Maybe it was Mike. I think it was Don though. Yeah. And said, we want to start up a new plating facility. What do you think? And I was like, okay, what day? I just had to talk to my wife, and she said, let's go.
Oh, wow.
That was amazing. That was
I knew you had something to do with Wakefield. I was raised in Phoenix, and I worked for Floyd Ramsey at Audio Recorders for a while before I came to Hollywood.
Yeah.
So you've been associated with really high quality, because Wakefield in those days was considered one of the best pressing plants in the country.
Yeah, I was going to say, for people that don't know, Wakefield is this kind of legendary
plant. And that's him.
Yeah. And so Gary came out of that, and it's no surprise that he's where he's at right now.
Yeah. So between Wakefield, RTI, and QRP, I don't know, it gets much better than that, if at all.
Well, Gary, don't forget classic pressing. That was.
Well, I'm sorry, Mike. Yeah, I just think of that all together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Mike.
Hey, Gary, you like me are trying to forget that experience, which we can talk about.
That was actually one of my most formative parts of my time in doing this. Since '79, I learned more about pressing during that period than I would ever want to, actually. But
me too.
That was amazing. Cutting records, all that was just amazing.
That's a key. That this whole thing, like this whole plating thing is like
magic.
It's amazing what goes on, because Ed Tobin and Greg Lee, when he passed away, it was, and there were people that worked with him and were assistants and all of this and could do it, I guess, under his eye. After he left, nothing it lost. They couldn't do it.
It was a mess.
It's almost almost like an art form. It's just like some mixers just have this sense that you don't know, you can't teach it in some way.
You gotta pass
You almost can look at the bath, or you can look at the way the plate comes out and you know what it's going to be. I mean, it's just something like that. It's like a great chef.
Yeah.
There are great platers, and then there's just guys that just run them through, and they just don't even understand it. There's something that like Gary has, or Ed Tobin has, or had, but I mean, there's just this kind of other sense that you have to have.
Well, let me just say that I spent many, many hours with Ed Tobin, and it's the same thing. I would run lacquers down actually he sprayed at 6 a.m. And so I had to be down there before that in order to get them in the tank and so forth. And, you know, Ed was one of those guys. There are pictures of him that I've sent to Chad, and, you'd never think that this guy, he looks kind of like a factory worker or whatever. And
yeah,
he had this little T-shirt on, but there was something that happened when he put that lacquer onto this, revolving hood.
It's a turntable of some sort of.
And he would silver.
Yeah.
I would just watch in amazement. He had this technique almost like an artist. He would just, it was the same every time. And he could just see, like Bernie's talking about, and he just knew. And that, what I'll say is, and I've said this before, that the reason classic records turned out the way they did was not really because of me, to be honest. It was really because of people like Bernie Grundman and Ed Tobin and Gary Salstrom and Rick Hashimoto at RTI and a host of other people who all were trying to do the best possible job they can. And I'll just say in advance, and Chad's not paying me to say this, but I think that tradition continues with Gary and Chad at QRP. And I just want to take a minute to go through what all these different versions of Kind of Blue that we put out. And in fact, I shared with Chad a little story. One time I was at a record show, and there was a consumer stand. I was not behind the booth, but and there was a consumer looking through, and one of the people that worked for me said, "Oh, that's the new version of Kind of Blue." And the guy who was looking at it goes, "Another version of Kind of Blue from Classic Records? Really? I've already got 4 different ones. Do I really need this?" And the reason that there were so many versions was that we were constantly innovating. So, I mentioned the 2-record set that was pressed on 180 gram at RTI. And if you just listen to that, it's like, wow, this is amazing. But then, on the heels of that, we did this version, which is Kyx Vinyl, which was a different vinyl formulation that we discovered. I got into this whole, there's another vinyl formulation, let's try that. And of course, it sounded better. And so, I was able to, for the first time actually, and I thank Chad for this, he sent me a copy of this latest UHQR version, let's call it, which again has this relationship I'll talk about. And for the first time, you can see my archive behind me, I was able to pull out all these versions. And of course, I was a little shocked at how many versions of Kind of Blue there were, and a little sheepish about it. But I listened to all of them, and I did the comparison. And, my notes are better bass definition, background clearer, hear deeper into the room. And then, of course, and I'll go through this quickly, there was the 200 gram version, right? The super vinyl profile, right? Same vinyl formula, same plates from the, from the same mother. And I put on this louder, so no groove distortion. Instruments sound more well-defined, real, can hear room, acoustics, and micro low-level detail. So that change in the profile to make a flat profile, and I won't go into all the details now, maybe we can do that another time. but there was an improvement. And then, of course, there's the ever popular handmade version, which were made on the same type of presses, these fine belts, these semi-automatics that
Yeah,
Chad
the fine belts, yeah.
talk about. These were actually done at Bill Smith Record Pressing down in El Segundo,
Yeah.
which is another story that I know Gary's cringing right now. And about all we went through to press these records. But there was an innovation, and this was a press innovation. This was, for the first time, we heard a semi-automatic press that made the record sound better than something pressed exactly the same way with exactly the same profile on, SMT presses at RTI. And we had been pressing 200-gram flat profile records there. And now all of a sudden, with the same vinyl, the same plates on a semi-automatic machine, it was even better. And then finally, and this is the segue into, the version that what we call the Clarity version. And of course, Chad has taken that and run with it as well. And this is the classic Clarity version. It's actually a little kind of got a blue tint to it, right? And I played that version, and I say slightly more laid back feel. Instruments jump out of black darkness / quiet background. Sound of individual instruments more integrated into space. Miles horn clearer, cleaner, and sharper. Bass definition improved. Low level detail improved. Less cartridge / electrical distortion. And so, that was for us the pinnacle. All these things were made from the same parts, and there was constant improvement over time. And
well, see, this has always been the goal, I think, because anybody that works with the original stuff, they know what the sound could be. But it's always been in this business, in whatever end of the business you're in, is how are we going to mass produce something that gives the public what we're hearing. And we all know that as good as it can be, we still aren't there, but we get closer all the time. But that's the goal, and I think that's the frustrating thing about it. We're always innovating and trying different things. And so because we hear that difference, we know that it's not coming back exactly the way the lacquer sounds. Everybody that's listened to the lacquer understands this.
Yeah.
But most people don't know, and if to them, it's the greatest thing they ever heard, and it probably is. But they don't know what we hear.
Yeah, exactly. Listening to the tape is quite an amazing experience.
It is. I mean, I remember when I first started at Contemporary, working for Lester. I would throw up some of those 2-track tapes, and it was like my mouth would fall open. It was just like, wow! I'd see, I'm right there.
Yeah, you're in the room, so to speak, and that I think is the objective. And what we were always trying to do was, as I describe it, we're trying to enable the listener to dispel their disbelief that this is a recording. Right? You got to get over that sense of disbelief and get drawn further into it. And
Michael Hobson, one question: do you remember the amount of copies, the number of copies you put out when you released your editions?
I don't, to be honest. We didn't number them because I didn't, at that point in time, I didn't want to be in the game of creating collectibles. And not that that's a bad thing for people, but numbered editions, obviously the low numbers, for reasons that shouldn't be, but becomes a collectible thing. So, I don't remember, but I will say, and Chad asked me this question recently, I believe Kind of Blue, of all the classic records, was probably the biggest seller over time. Part of that was it was in print for a very long time. It was pretty early on, from 97 all the way to 2010, it was in print. And all these versions, that people kept buying. And it's what we refer to as an evergreen. It's like, if it's in print, it just keeps selling, right? It's always selling, and so forth. And so it's been out of print for 11 years from the classic standpoint. And I just want to say a couple things, and then I'm going to turn it over because I think I've monopolized things, and I appreciate, you guys humoring me on that front. But there's more to this story, but I'm going to hand off here by saying, and again, I want to say that, Chad's not paying me anything for this. He paid me handsomely in 2010 to take over Classic Records. And the truth of the matter is that I implored him, and I've been in constant contact with him over time. We're actually good friends. At least I think so. And I at least from my perspective, but I always implored Chad to continue in the tradition of Classic Records and continue to try to improve and innovate. And the first thing I told him was, and after I named it the pressing company, I take credit for that. And he did that. And he also hired Gary Salstrom, which I think is instrumental. But from my perspective, he's done all the things that I didn't get a chance to. And he's going to talk about some of that. At the end of the game, I'll just tell you, I'll give the story away, or the punchline. When I sat down with, and he so kindly sent me a copy of the UHQR, and in fact, I'm probably going to buy a second copy because that's the right thing to do, is have two copies, right? A backup of something so special. And I want to say from my heart that there wasn't any ego involved. In fact, I said to Chad before he sent me this copy, I said, Chad, I expect that this latest version, which uses the same mother, so it has its lineage back to Classic Records and to the original session master and to Bernie Grundman, and with Gary as well. I said, I expect it's going to be better than any of the other versions that I have. And I'm happy to report, again, that it is. I listened to it, and it is, in my mind, and what I said to Chad was, you've finally done justice to the metal parts, right? You finally presented them, which is a representation of the tape, which of course is a representation of the session and the music. You finally got it to a point where, frankly, I can't imagine there being a better version. And so I'm sad to tell people that are watching or will see this and confront this UHQR version. It really is something you have to have, at least from my perspective, if you love Kind of Blue, which I do. It's a record that I can continue to listen to. And I can't say that about all the records behind me. There are some records that I can't listen to anymore. I've heard them too many times.
Yeah.
So,
well, I have to say one thing about you and all those years that we worked together. You always didn't care if it was going to take a lot of extra time, a lot of extra effort to correct things or whatever it was going to take. You always went the extra mile that way. You're a true audiophile. I mean, you really, the main thing was having that product the best it can be. And we would do the craziest things.
We did crazy things.
Switch the de-esser in and out on vocals and things, just on the S's.
Yeah.
Manually, mark the tape and do. I mean, we did just zillions of things. And even on those 3 tracks, there were places where when they did the 3-track on Kind of Blue, when Coltrane comes in, he's really loud on one of those tracks. I had to mark the tape by hand, lower him, and then as the engineer was trying to pull it down, I was working against what the engineer did, and I had to put all these other marks, bringing it back up so that he sounded more even. But I mean, this takes a lot of time. In computers, you can just draw a line and make it do that. But in analog, you got to do it all by hand. But that's part of why the quality's better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, in the same vein as watching Ed Tobin, and by the way, Gary Salstrom in his footsteps, Silver, watching Bernie come in or make a move, as he would call it, and then come back out. It's like watching a musician, on a particular part. There's just a flow to it it's beautiful to watch. And I know Bernie probably doesn't miss this, but I spent a lot of hours at Bernie Grundman mastering. We generally, for well over a decade, had 2 4-hour sessions every week of every month of every year. We were a pretty big customer then, and I have to say with pleasure that I got to spend some amazing times with my good friend Bernie Grundman, who is at the pinnacle of mastering.
Well, thank you.
So Bernie, Mike, you probably said it already, but I mean, like there's very little mastering done on. I mean, the sound of the tape of the Kind of Blue 3-track was so good. Y'all didn't really have to. You know, it's pretty much a flat transfer, if I'm not mistaken. You know, from what I hear.
Yeah, as Bernie would say, we just got out of the way.
Right.
Yeah. If the system can reproduce it and cut it in the groove, I mean, you know, the system, you can really simplify the system then, because some of the correction, of course, is more electronics. So we have 3 different signal paths now in the studio. We can go direct right from a tape or something, or right from a digital, right to the lathe, and with only level control. Or we can actually, some of the stuff we don't do anything except set a level when we're getting in something somebody else has done, but we can transfer it and come out with almost 100% exactly like what the master is.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people are, you know, need to understand. I mean, y'all went directly from the 3-track to the lacquer. I mean, it's Correct. You can't be more direct, more pure. It was a 3-track that was barely used, fresh. Yeah. Went directly from that with hardly any EQ to the lacquer. I mean, you just can't get better than that. I mean, because anytime you're mastering, of course, like if you got to do something, I mean, something's got to give in a way. Like if you don't have to touch it, like you say, get out of the way, it really doesn't get better than that. So, I mean, and a lot of people question, are they going to 2-track? And, you know, so everything else that's been made of Kind of Blue on at least on LP wasn't directly from the 3-track. So, I mean, we already had one level closer than anything else that's been done on the Kind of Blue. Plus, with Bernie's, you know, electronics, and I mean, it just can't really get any. It can't be a better album. You know, it can't get any better than that. And then there was no edits. I mean, this is just live to 3-track.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's all part of this whole thing about the signal path and so forth. You know, even we all know as audiophiles that even the wire makes a big difference. We've sat around and listened to wire for weeks, you know, picking the right wire in the system. And it's true, if you don't have to put anything in the circuit, and our whole system is set up so that you can bypass everything if it's okay to bypass. I mean, if it's so good that you don't need any equalization, you don't need any processing, we can actually bypass everything and go direct from the tape. But you can't. A lot of times you have to do something, but then you have to have equipment that's designed in such a way that there's very little degradation.
Right. And I will say, to add to that, in the case of Kind of Blue, and I think I did send the notes to everyone. Bernie, I think I sent those to your Gmail account. Did you look at your email at all? I sent the notes from the session, and there's no EQ on this.
Okay.
Here is a copy of the original notes. And
very good.
And and it's got the settings for the center channel, right? There's probably people can't see, but in the notes there, in between, you'll see those little marks. That's he had a little piece. He had tape on his console, and he had these little marks, and that's how he would set the center channel, and then he would put it on the notes. You know how much of the center channel, and
just draw a little picture. Just draw a little picture.
Yeah. So you were actually as Chad says, mixing on the fly.
That's right.
by the way, I want everybody to know as well that this was cut on all tube cutting system. So that's, I think, maybe part of the magic as well. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and to be able to see it improved, and maybe Chad and Gary can speak to, you know, what they've brought to the equation and answer the question, you know, why remake Kind of Blue again, and what makes, you know, this version what it is, which to my ear is the best version of all.
Well, yeah, our goal, it is always the goal to heighten the experience and the emotional connection with whatever music it is. And so if you can go further and have even a bigger experience, more satisfying experience, why not?
Exactly.
So Chad and Gary, why don't you discuss what happened when you decided you're going to do this project, what steps you took to do this project? You had to get the metal parts out. You had to make a new stampers from the mother, and then what happened, or how did that all work?
Well, first I want to thank Mike Hobson for there's three Michaels, right? And my middle name is Michael, but I want to thank Hobson for, you know, ABing those records. I mean, I don't know how many records you must have listened to. And,
I have it stuck in my head now.
Well, he knows all the lyrics to all those songs now.
I mean, what you said is a very big compliment and a very big endorsement, because, you know, you and Bernie and Gary all did so much work over the years trying to improve, and then working with the vinyl formulation when you came up with Clarity and you came up with the flat profile. And I'm going to have Gary show y'all's original when y'all cut the UHQR in half. He's going to show that in a little while. But I know you worked real hard, and Bernie said how crazy y'all got to try to you know, like I always say, we improve like 10 little things, and they're subtle, or at least they're subtle to other people. They're huge to us. But let's just say there's 10 little things you improve, but you add all them 10 little things of improvement, and it makes one big thing, you know. And, you know, for you to be, you know, selfless or not have your ego involved, and be happy that we were able to somewhat up one more step of the game that y'all did. And I think a lot of it was the clarity the vinyl got a bit better. You know what I mean? Like what you started got better. And we appreciate all the steps. Like, you handed the ball off to me. You know, we know that you were continuing to work to get everything better. And, you know, handed it off to me. And then you always was there if I had a question. Hey, you know, what do you think about this? And was happy for us to continue the quest of the ultimate, you know. And you discovered like the flat profile of the UHQR, and you also told me, hey man, I know you're getting in the record business. You better call Gary, and you better get that son of a gun to Kansas, whatever it takes.
Yeah, I did. I said that. I also, Chad, the other thing I want to add, and if you guys will indulge me, I apologize for this, but I think you'll appreciate it. Two things on that front, and this will allow Chad to hopefully talk about some of the innovations that QRP has brought to the table. And back to what Bernie said before, often what happens with record companies back in the day when the vinyl was the main format was they were looking for ways to make production smoother, right? And then, of course, they wanted to cut costs as well after a while and try to make more money. But that often led to, at pressing plants, and I saw some of this at RTI when I first got there, but I have to give, you know, Gary, and I think he'll agree with me, Rick Hashimoto, credit, because, you know, if I think maybe I inspired them a little bit, or I talked them to death and they just went along with it. and Grundman probably the same way, to try and improve things over time. It's against what their nature is. They want to just keep doing things. If they've got a formula down, they want to do things the way that it makes it easiest for them and most continuous without problems. But we were always pushing the limit. And I remember when we had classic pressing, which Chad inherited and bought and so forth, and which became QRP and is obviously a much bigger scale. But one of the things Gary and I had talked about was, because of this mechanic that helped us renovate the presses, was we wanted to control the temperature during the cycle, right? These 300-degree biscuits of vinyl with labels attached to them for people that have seen, that process. The objective in molding plastic, which is what you're doing, is to have the temperature go to the same level every time, and then this cooling cycle to go the same every time, and for that temperature across the die to be constant, and to be able to, the only way you can do that is monitor it. And one of the things that Chad has done is along those lines, and I'll let him explain that in more detail. But I want to just, one last thing, and this involves Fremer. I have, for all time, always credited Fremer with the origins of Clarity Vinyl, both the classic Clarity and now Chad's Clarity Vinyl, which he'll talk about that formula as well. And it happened one time when as I mentioned early in this conversation, when I went to visit Michael at his home. He's got his listening room in the basement, and he's got a nice intimate setup there with more records than God. I don't know how he finds anything, but he said, hey, he was playing me all these different things, and it sounded wonderful. And he said, hey, check this out. I want to demagnetize this record. And I'm like, what? You're going to demagnetize a record? What's this all about? So I said to him, well, I need to hear something that I know. So we picked this song off of Masked and Anonymous, which is a soundtrack with Bob Dylan and so forth. And there's a particular cut female vocal on that record that is incredibly haunting and intimate. And of course, the wizard cut it. And so we put this on, and I listened to it because I know it and I love it. It's another one of the things that I can actually listen to again and again. And then he took the record. Fremer took the record off, didn't touch anything, didn't touch the volume, didn't turn it down, nothing. Took the record off, put it onto this demagnetizer, which I, of course, have one. It's made by a company called Furatech in Japan, which I later did business with. Anyway, he puts it on, he pushes this button. 15 seconds later, he takes the record off, puts it back on. I'm still sitting in the same spot, nothing different. He puts the needle back down, and as Bernie said, my jaw just dropped. I went, what? And so I set out to find out what was going on here. And I talked to the guys actually at Furatech, and I said, what? And they explained to me, and I have to admit, I was ignorant, that the carbon black that makes records black, vinyl pellets are not, innately black. You have to put carbon black in them to make them black, right? That there's trace amounts of metal in that carbon black. And so what you have effectively in a black vinyl record of any description, by the way, all the way back, is you've got, something that is randomly got magnetization in it. And so you've got this little transducer, which we call a cartridge, which is an electromagnetic transducer. And you've got these stray magnetic fields going around on the record, distorting electrically the playback. So the one way to get rid of it is to demagnetize it, and you can immediately hear the difference. And so I couldn't demagnetize every record we put out. So I asked the obvious question of somebody, and that is, can we take the carbon black out? And they said, well, yeah, let's try it. And so that's what led to Clarity Vinyl. And the first time I played a Clarity versus even a demagnetized black record, it was like, I can't go back. It's amazing. And again, I'd like to commend Chad for continuing in that tradition, making ultra high quality records, UHQRs, be not only handmade, which we started, Gary and I started really with Bill Smith, but continuing in this tradition of making it the best possible way in terms of the profile being flat, making them on semi-automatic presses by hand, which is labor intensive, and and also using Clarity Vinyl and new and improved super vinyl formula. My hat's off to you guys. And I said to Chad when I sold him the record company, I said, listen, what I insist that you do is to continue to innovate and make the best possible records that you possibly can. And by God, he's done it. And my hat's off to you and Gary for the amazing work that you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to just add to that in that, I've been in, like I said, I've been in the business a long time. I work with all kinds of producers and artists and, people in the manufacturing area and all that. And anybody that really is passionate and serious about audio and really is looking for quality is really open. They're not competitive in a way.
Right.
In that way. In other words, like my way is better or your way is better. The main thing is that we're all trying to get to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can help each other, we should do that, because in the end, we just have a better product if we share.
Hey man, when I love it when I can't reissue every record. Mike Hobson couldn't reissue every record. And so when I don't call him my competitor, but I guess you'd say, like for instance, Mobile Fidelity, I like it when they make a record that sounds great, because sometimes they'll pick one of my favorite records, like the Bill Withers Greatest Hits is one of my favorite records, and they did a great job on it. And I didn't license it, and I ain't got time to do every record. I got to go to sleep sometime at night. And I'm happy, and because we sell all records, so I get to recommend that record to my friends and customers. So, we're all, first of all, Bernie, we're the luckiest people on earth, I feel, because we get to do our hobby for a living.
Yeah.
We get to see how the sausage is made. It was your being intrigued on Bernie's intrigue, being, seeing recordings being made and getting his first job with Contemporary and the whole history. And now he's cutting everything from Michael Jackson Thriller to Contemporary records again. Like he gets to play in the sandbox every day,
Yeah.
And
well, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and get paid, and hopefully
paid.
somewhat decently. And he's recognized all over the world. I mean, if Bernie goes to Hong Kong, there's people that would love to go out to dinner with Bernie. And what about the musicians Bernie gets to? I mean, did Michael Jackson come to the Thriller?
Well, a Thriller, maybe not much. Just Bruce Swedien, the engineer. Michael, I don't know about that particular. No, I don't think he came to that one.
Okay, well, I mean, not Michael Jackson, but Neil Diamond comes. How many of the artists?
Yeah, a lot of people have come, and he did come for later albums. I mean, Michael came for later albums.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, like, what? I mean, and you're getting paid. I mean, come on. Like, I mean, like.
Yeah.
At the same time?
Sure.
No, you're right. You're right. No, these are very choice jobs. I mean, everybody would love to be in this business and do this kind of thing, but the thing is, there's only room for so many also.
Right. Same with Mike getting to see the 3-tracker Kind of Blue.
Yeah.
Look, I barely graduated high school, man. I no engineer degree here. I mean, I just. The only thing I say is, I don't have to stick my head up a cow's ass to see where butter comes from. You know, I'm the
But
one
Chad,
that takes.
Chad, was that a hit? Was that a hint
Well
that
put,
you are
Chad.
doing Michael Jackson's Thriller on UHQR?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hey, mate, you know, you never
That'd be
know,
great.
but that's going to
That's a
take
great
some
sound
work.
to take.
But you know,
I know who
I'm the
cut it.
guy that knows what butter's supposed to taste. Good butter tastes like,
Yeah.
and I'm the one that listens to you know Bernie, and maybe me and Mike are the last chance of improving anything the engineer might have done.
Yeah.
We know what the customer. Hopefully, we know what the cost. Is Michael on mute?
So
Oh, I
Bernie,
think so. Yeah.
Bernie,
I think Fremer was talking, but he's on mute.
he's on mute. Hey, Bernie,
Yeah.
isn't your old saying that you're the last opportunity? What's
Well,
your
whenever I start out talking about mastering, I just tell everyone, I said, look, mastering is what I call the sobering part of the business. Because, you know, people have been in the studio mixing things or whatever, and every new person that walks in the room, they turn the level up to make everyone excited and so forth. And they've been fooling themselves by just, you know, you get a kinetic thing going if you just play it loud on some of these pop things. So when they get to me, they're a little bit timid because it's like, oh my God, what do we really have? How does it really stack up against everything else when we can't go and raise the level for ours? So, you know, it comes down to like, let's really get serious about this because this now is the last chance. So let's get the most out of this thing. Let's make it have the most effect on people and so forth in a good way.
Right. Hopefully, you know, people want it to be pleasant. You know what I mean? A lot of things are very bright, very detailed.
Well, it depends on who you're talking to. You know, look, Skrillex, this stuff is so bright you can't even listen to it normally. You have to be in a club.
Let's get to this project. I'm seeing the comments. People want you guys, Chad and Gary, to talk about the production of this record because we've gone on way too long other stuff.
What have you done lately, Chad, for us in terms of, you know, this?
Well, I want to say that, you know, we took the clarity idea and the clarity that you started with. And listen, a lot of this is Gary and Casey at TPC. You know, I mean, I know, you know, I'm getting some credit that I kind of don't totally deserve when y'all talk about it, but Gary and Casey have been taking the clarity, which is the pure vinyl, and they're just can continue to improve it. I mean, actually, even since the first Hendrix until now, they've got it's a lot better now. We don't really want to make a big deal of it and change numbers like we got a clarity XY12Z. Because, you know, that all gets confusing, but it's a never-ending process of trying to improve what you started, what Hobson started, or just the quest of making the finest record ever made. And so that's what's going on, man. We're just taking, you know, we're looking in the past. A lot of times we can't better what those engineers recorded. When we did like the Ellington masterpieces, that was recorded in 1950. Nobody's beat that until today. I mean, what's that, 71 years?
Let's talk about this record. I'm telling you, the natives are resting. Right, well, let's talk about this record.
We're trying to keep improving the master, everything, and we think we have, and we try to do everything. Like, I mean, we started with the best possible parts from the original 3-track tape. We have a flat profile. We've upgraded the back sander, and our center punch is better. We're doing it on a semi-automatic press, which has no vibrations. The temperature control is better than it's ever been. The cycle time is longer. It gets a better impression. We got the Clarity Vinyl, the purest vinyl. The Stoughton tip-on jackets, the best jackets ever made. We get handmade boxes, leatherette dowel spine, numbered edition. We press our labels printed in-house. We got Ashley Kahn write the liner notes and the Robert Palmer original liner notes that Mike made. You know, there's nothing else we can think of to make a better record. You know, we've thrown everything at this.
How many
and we have
records?
not.
How many records do you press to a given stamper? People want to know that.
About 500.
500.
Yeah.
Oh, that's-
Approximately.
And you know, Michael, I'll just add to this. Something people don't really understand is that they think that the stampers wear out after 500 records, but I think Gary can speak to this. Generally, what happens is the stamper fails at the rim where it's held down onto the die. So
at the pressure points, the pinch off.
yeah,
where it's-
or at the center label where you have to hold the stamper down. So it's not that the stampers, quote, you wear them out and you only get 500 records. They end up splitting. Is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, that's as far as sound quality, we're listening to it, or I'm listening to it constantly while Scott's pressing them. You know, the amount of pressure that's involved, I think, is about 150 tons.
Yeah.
And it's just constantly flexing when you go into the heat cycle. The stamper, the nickel is expanding and then contracting when you go to the cold water, which is, it's not cold water, it's about 72 degrees. But it's constantly flexing the stamper. And then you have the edges of the dies that actually come together down onto the stamper with the vinyl in between it, obviously, but it's a very thin amount of vinyl by the time the cycle's done. So their stampers are getting worked pretty hard. So at the end of the day, it's, did we do our carbon treatments in the plating room and keep our, we have a profile that we, Mike taught me a lot about profiles and how to look at it and, cutting a lot of records up. In fact,
This
Yeah,
is
he's
the
going to
origin.
show when Mike and them discovered the flat profile on the UHQR.
Mike
Yeah.
almost gave me a nervous breakdown when I was working for him doing this. I have the original one in here. Remember that, Mike?
Oh yeah. That's a UHQR of Respighi,
This
I
is a
think, right?
JVC UHQR of Holst,
The planet.
Pines of Rome.
Yeah.
And you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's totally flat profile all the way across.
So if you
They
take
cut
a
it in half.
micrometer, it's the same across the profile of
Can
the
you
record.
see the numbers that they wrote down? You probably can't see it, but there's little numbers that they measured this, and they went through a process to finally figure out.
Yeah.
You
it
have
was
to
a
get new
flat
dies
profile.
made, actually, to
This is,
to accommodate a flat
Bill
profile.
We're doing work with them. But yeah, Mike, if I wasn't at Bill Smith or RTI, I was at my desk cutting records apart.
Oh, I know. I remember
Yeah.
one of those guillotine cutters. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, Gary, can you talk to people about some of the innovations like the back sander and why that matters in terms of making a better record, and also this sophisticated centering machine you have and so forth?
well, our back sander, it's made by a company, Cybert out of England that we met at.
Don't tell them. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
No,
at the
no.
last Making Vinyl, guy Ian, who's got quite a funny sense of humor, introduced Chad to the machine, and through Rick Hashimoto, they had gotten one. It's an orbital sanding as opposed to a radial. One of the big things is the amount of pressure you put on the back of the stamper when you're sanding is really critical. That, along with how smooth is the back of the stamper. You want it as smooth as possible. But when you're sanding radially by hand, you can't really get the same result from stamper to stamper, or even from the inside label area to the outside edge. So you can actually introduce a lot of surface noise, create a sort of orange peel, depending on if there's any roughness. So the idea is that nothing on the back of that stamper interrupt the flow of music. You don't want any, obviously dents or anything like that. But this was an innovation that actually creates a nice even surface along the back of the stamper, was something that I was new to. Then the centering machine is from the same company, It was used for Blu-ray, and when records started getting big again, they retrofitted it to work for stampers, 14-inch stampers. So we use those. Both of them give us much more control. In fact, the back center is probably the biggest thing that in the vinyl formulation.
The center punch.
The center punch was from the same company.
Right. We've done a video on it that shows, I mean, these things are so high tech and so awesome, but of course they cost a shitload, you know what I mean? And you're not going to find these in most record pressing plants, you know, because they got the old school way of doing it, which is fine, but it's a lot easier. You can't do as good a job. And who's going to spend over $100 grand? You know, there's only a few people, you know. And I wanted to ask, like Bernie and that, you know, there's a lot of pressing plants that and Gary that polish the parts.
Yeah.
You see this, Bernie?
Well, yeah, actually, we catch plants doing this all the time because, you know, a lot of these plants, it's all about the numbers. You know, they just want the record to go out the door and they can get the charges for it. So if they do have some noise, if the surface is a little bit noisy, they polish it, and they polish it with like a jeweler's. Wait a minute, this phone here. It's like a jeweler's rouge. And but you got a price to pay for that. Yeah, it might be a little quieter, not as much surface noise, but the quality of the sound, you actually are wiping off the quality of the transients and also of the extreme high end.
Yeah, and the other reason for that was to make it easier to press.
Exactly. Yeah, not as much. So Gary, would you be willing to share our revelation, because you and I, you know, at my insistence, tried it, and I think it led to some of the innovations at QRP in terms of what we found out about the vibration of the machines having an impact on the final product, and also by virtue of why that matters with the fine builds, how we discovered. We actually, do you remember the story when we decoupled and we were pressing while it was decoupling?
Right. Yeah.
You want to share that story?
So we've, you know, that was with when Mark was out from Arizona. When we first separated them, it was just an amazing difference. So we've expanded on that here, or carried that on, in that we, of course, the fine built, the hydraulic system is not attached to the press. We've got it as far away as we can get it, and it's on isolation pads. A line that we're putting in the process of right now, I'm kind of excited about, and that the hydraulic will be in another room on the other side of us, on another slab of concrete, basically. So it'll be interesting to see the possibilities. But we've also done that to our SMTs, where all of the hydraulics have been. I don't know if you're not familiar with an SMT. The hydraulic is actually attached to the press. It's basically a single unit, and then the extruder added in. So it's two pieces. We have disconnected the hydraulic from the press and put that on isolation pads as well. So yeah, it's a much different operation as far as the vibration that the press is feeling as it's cycling through pressing the record.
Yeah, I think for people that aren't intimately involved in this, as I described before, this biscuit, 300-degree biscuit with labels on it, gets pressed, and the vinyl flows out almost like when you squeeze a cookie, and then it cools, and then it releases, and you trim it, and so forth. So think about it. If you've got this big press that's 150 tons of pressure is sitting there vibrating itself, and you've got molten polyvinyl chloride, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to transmit some of the vibration of the press, it's low frequency, into the record press, into the record itself. And you're going to hear that pressing distortion. And so when you decouple that, which is what they've done, you hear all this low level detail that Bernie, got off the tape into the lacquer. All of a sudden, it comes jumping out.
Like I say to people, if I went to your turntable stand while you were playing the record and I shook the leg, is that going to improve the sound?
It's a good way to put it.
So, I mean, we took away all the vibration we possibly can, because I mean, why you're sitting there pressing a record? Why you want anything vibrating? I mean, listen, whatever level of improvement it does, it's got to do something, because there's no vibration there. And so we're trying to do everything possible. And you thought of a lot of it. Gary thought of a lot of it. Basically, I hadn't thought of a lot of it, but Gary's like, okay, this is going to cost you this amount of thousands. And then that's where all right, let's do it, man.
15,000.
Well, it's all the way down to the playback turntables too, isolating them and all that vibration.
Everything matters.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, RTI doesn't polish the parts.
No.
That wasn't one of because Gary worked there.
No.
RTI does and we don't. It's a very important thing. It gets kind of lost in, the way you could tell when a pressing plant, and they're kind of cheating. They're cheating. Now it makes a quieter record, but you get it's a real smooth sound. They stripping off the high end information, and if you get the original Mobile Fidelity, like the original Mobile Fidelity company, not the current Mobile Fidelity company, which is different people. They used to put in there, JVC Japan does not polish the part, and they explain why. And we don't do that, and RTI doesn't do that. There's a lot of pressing plants that do it, and the way you can tell is if the record sounds smooth, and you buy, say, from one particular reissue label, if you buy a classical record and a blues record and a rock record, and they all have that kind of a signature, that's kind of, I don't know, a dead giveaway. It's almost like you can hear in different style of music the same kind of signature sound. And I don't know.
You can even see it if you get the disc to reflect the light in the right way. It's like a little bit of a feathery thing off of the scribe. Even it's like a smear. It's a very faint smear.
The ridges from the scribe, it's smoothing out, right?
Yeah,
it's smooth. Yeah, on the scribe, the lead out groove. It's
doing the same thing to the groove.
Yeah, it's smoothing out the groove.
Well, of course, I can see it under the microscope all over the place.
Yeah.
It looks like a clear.
I think there has been some great questions in the comments down below. There has been some great
good questions.
And one of those questions has been, how do you plan on doing this large amount of pressings of 25,000 on 33 1/3 compared to the 45, which also will come out? Will you finish the whole 33 1/3 and then eventually start the 45, or do you do a mixture?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we've already sold in 2 days over 15,000 of them. So everybody, when's the 45 coming? When's the 40? We're like, hey man, give us a freaking chance to finish your damn 30. I mean, this shit is so much. Excuse my language, but I'm passionate. It's so much harder than anybody would ever realize. This is all humans that are doing records one by hand and inspecting them one by hand. The jackets are made one by hand. The boxes, the leatherette dials, everything is a handmade process and expensive, and it takes time and it's expensive, and we love doing it. And there's only one way to do it, and it's the best. But we can't spit these things out like they do CDs.
We just have to do the pay button on PayPal, and then it's ours.
How many have you pressed of the 25,000 that you're committed to pressing so far?
We pressed so far?
Yeah.
Gary, I don't know, but we're about at 6 right now.
6 records or
We
6,000?
had 57. We had 5,700 because we didn't. I mean, listen. Between the time we licensed this and the time we went to press it, the vinyl world had changed. I mean, honestly, we were looking at making 7,500 of this thing, you know, and people started crying and screaming and begging us to make more because of what's going on. People.
Why don't you tell people what's going on? Chad, why don't you take 2 minutes and tell people what's going on in terms of the volume of records that you're pressing and that you're being asked to press compared to what it was like 5 years ago?
We press Hendrix and we press Beatles, and we're turning away all new customers. We're sorry. We just can't take it, you know. And it's, you know, it's going to be hard to kick the Beatles and Hendrix off the press. You know what I'm saying? Like,
you told me once that you have one press dedicated to Abbey Road. Was that hyperbole or was that real?
No, shit, we could have the whole pressing plant dedicated to Abbey Road and it wouldn't be enough.
Please don't, Chet. Please don't.
That's crazy.
Right. So, I mean, we, as far as, well, I was talking about, people are like, when's the 45 come? Hey, man, as soon as we can. Okay, as soon as we can. Let us get through the 30. I mean, we're very, very, I should be very careful on how I sound because we really appreciate the orders.
It's impossible, Chad. Give up. You can't be careful about how you sound.
We're
Ever.
very appreciative of the orders, and it's all a good problem. All of this is a good problem, a problem that Fremer didn't see coming. I didn't see coming. Nobody saw coming. It's a good problem, but we only had enough vinyl to do 6,000. So we almost, and we're going to go in there and show them. They're pressing the record right now. We're going to bring the camera in there. The only reason we didn't have it in the backdrop, it was a little bit noisy. We're going to go show them pressing the record by hand, and we're going to show them wrapping the record by hand. But we only had about 6,000 worth of vinyl made in only 7,500 jackets. So we're waiting for new vinyl. I spent $7,500 extra to have it trucked instead of having it on the rail, the train from Long Beach. It comes from Thailand to Long Beach, from Long Beach to Kansas by rail, from Thailand on a boat, Long Beach by railroad. But we spent $7,500 just to get it by truck to speed it up a couple days. And we're also same thing with the jacket company, Stoughton Printing. They're giving us 5 months before we can get jackets. That's how crazy it is. Same with the vinyl. And so when people are like, when's the 40? It's like, man, please let us make the 33s. We sold almost 16,000 already. So we got only 9 more thousand. I don't know how long that will take, but if we sold 16,000 in that short of a time, you know, that's the other thing I want to tell all my great friends. I have a lot of friends, and we really appreciate my great friends. But don't call me in 2 months, my great friends, wondering if I have a 33 kind of blue. Okay.
This is like Ringo Starr saying, "Peace and love. Don't send me anything. I'm not going to sign it. I'm throwing it away." That's what he said.
Right. I mean, we appreciate the business, but you know, it's like I say, buy now or cry later. If you don't want it, and there's another thing, people, $100 is too much for a record. Hey, there's a lot of kind of blue. Somebody said there was 400 different reissues of kind of blue. If I think anybody watching this is into the ultimate. They want the ultimate. That's what we're creating. We're trying to create the ultimate. We're trying to do it at a price that's somewhat in a reasonable amount. But quality comes at a price, man, and our customers want the best. So we can't do the best fast and we can't do the best cheap, but we're give us some time to finish the 33s. Then we'll do the 45. I don't really know when that's going to be. Maybe 6 months from now.
Don't give it time. What are you, crazy?
Right, I know, because they call and it's great. I don't know. I can't really tell, but all I can tell you for sure is we've already pre-sold 16,000. That's just in a couple of days. We've made about 6,000. We're waiting for new jackets and new vinyl, and this is a handmade process that takes really a long time. We make about, I don't know, 300 a day.
300 to 360, correct.
Wow.
3 to 360 a day. Okay, so do the math.
Do the math.
Um,
Yeah. Can you show us, Chad?
Yeah, let's see.
Excuse me?
Can you show us the process?
Right. Can you take the, yeah, we'll take the camera out there and we'll show you the guys over there slaving away, man. And his name is Scott, and Gary trained him, and he's very
You let him go
passionate.
home or what?
Yeah, he doesn't let him go home.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's Saturday. They don't always work on Saturday, but we had them since they're selling so well, and we're going to do this video. Again, I really, hopefully I don't come across too, it's just we're trying so hard, and when we get these calls, like and everybody's excited, I know, we're excited, but it's just, our main goal is quality, and we can't rush it. That's,
Oh, look, here we go.
okay. There you go, man. Wow. I thought we were going to have to go out there, but
Oh,
there
wow.
he is.
Now, one of the big things about this is the vinyl we're using today it's about the third revision of it by Casey for TPC. This current version, when Chad told me we were going to be doing Kind of Blue, I knew certain problems were going to be, I think So What's the first song at the beginning of it. It's the hardest thing I've ever been associated with pressing.
Oh, yeah.
Due to non-fill, and then you over adjust for non-fill, you get all these other problems like surface noise. And so this version of the vinyl, we ordered Casey, like I said, sent samples. I said, Casey, this is going to do it. Let's get some in here, but you don't want to invest in 20,000 pounds and not know that it's going to work for sure. The other vinyl I knew wasn't going to work. So there's been a lot of delay just in that part alone. That new vinyl came in, it worked right away. It's a formulation that's actually very similar to our black vinyl now, because it does press it. It flows over the stamper in a much different way. That the fluidity of the vinyl and the way it forms to the groove. It was like night and day when we started using this vinyl. If we can press Kind of Blue, I think we can press just about anything on this vinyl. And then, it sounds better as far as I'm concerned. It sounds much better. So that was a big thing, is just getting the vinyl right.
Wow.
The stampers we had to do, that was a lot of work that's been years in the making, as far as getting the taper of the stamper to match the die. There can't be much variation. So you want about a 1 to 2 thousandths taper from the lockout to the lead in. And you really don't want, 4, 6, 7. You want to know every stamper is the same. So we've managed, Stan's our plating guy. He keeps the tanks in good shape. And, our stampers are consistent. The weight needs to be within 5 grams at the most from one stamper to the next. The controls on this are at a level that we've never done. Even the temperature controls, I wasn't sure that was going to work.
Can they hear us? James, can you zoom in on the PLC, the programmable logic controller? The computer? I don't know if they can hear us. Man, we should have had this on the screen the whole time. I mean, us
That's
ugly
pretty cool.
old farts in the back, when we could have had him making the record. But anyway, yeah, there's the PLC, the latest technology with the oldest, like 1950 press, that tells us exactly the temperature of each die.
Correct. It's monitoring the temperature of the die, not the steam or the water. So we know, because it's the die that comes in contact with the vinyl. It's obviously not the steam directly. So there's a probe that's set into the die. That's on the bottom die right in front of Scott. that goes about 6 inches or 5 to 6 inches into the die. And if they manage to do that without hitting the channel, we've got good temperature control. That goes into the PLC, like Chad was saying. It's constantly monitoring the temperature. I tell it when I want it to start pressing. I tell it when I want it to open up, and it's very accurate. The temperature varies maybe 1 to 2 degrees from one record to the next. Probably more like 1 degree. It's really not 2 degrees.
Well, in the past, that's always been the big problem, is consistency.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is something that Mark Huggett, who I've worked with a lot, that we brought into Classic when I was working for Mike. I remember back in our Wakefield days, sitting at the brake table. He was in the maintenance crew, and I was in plating. We'd sit there at the table talking about how he envisioned someday being able to use some kind of computer control, and I don't know that he was the only one that ever thought of that. I mean, Mike, I remember talking about it, and Mark enabled us to be able to figure this out, and it's something that it's pretty cool to be able to see it actually happen, and I'm sure Mike knows a lot of that history. And
oh yeah. Hey Gary, just a question: what's the cycle time?
Okay. The cycle time to get a finished record is 1 minute. It's
Okay.
59 seconds to 60 seconds.
On the
That's
fine
not
belt.
just in the dies. That's from trimmer to trimmer. What
Right.
did you say, Mark?
On the fine belts?
On the fine belt, yeah. On the SMT, it's different. The SMT is, well, both presses are they're influenced by the cut, and I'm sure you guys know the geometry. It's different from every record. Fortunately, Bernie knows how to space the grooves. A lot of guys don't know how to do that, which helps us a lot. If there's too much space, the vinyl doesn't flow properly. If the grooves are too close together, the vinyl doesn't flow properly. So it's I remember Bernie working with Rick Hashimoto a lot back in the 90s when Mike was wanting 180 gram records, and then 45 especially. That groove spacing became really critical. Okay, I just kept going on and on. I forget what I was addressing.
Yeah, we're just talking about cycle time and
Oh, right. Yeah.
Chad's
So
point.
versus the SMT, it's in the SMT, which is an automatic press, it's between 35 and 40 seconds for a heavyweight record. Now we're pressing 200 grams plus on the fine belt, so you would expect it to be a little bit longer, but it's a little bit different methodology I'm using on the fine belt versus the SMT as far as how we do the cycles. So
They're putting the numbers on right now, the gold foil stamp.
everything's hand done.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah, so he's going to show you. They're going to be packaging them up. We should have really had this the whole time, because I mean.
So Gene goes through each of the jackets and inspects them. We pride ourselves in trying to put out the best, taking what Stoughton sends us, which are the best jackets made.
Yeah.
And then if there's any scuffs or anything that happens in shipping or in the packaging of the jackets, we pull those out of the system. So she's numbering the jackets that she's already looked at that look perfect. Over here is where we do all the record inspection. Those are records waiting to be inspected on Monday that were pressed Friday. And then over in this area is where they're actually jacketing and preparing. And right there, it's the UHQR box that they're putting the jacketed Miles Davis into. And then it goes into the next room and it gets shrink wrapped and boxed and ready to go across the street to the warehouse. So
Very
that's
impressive.
It's incredible.
It's very, very labor. Excuse me.
Incredible.
I was
So,
just gonna say
I wanted to add something because Gary, you brought it up about the weight of the records, and people have asked, like, why 200 gram? Isn't 180 grams enough? And the answer is, we didn't make 200 grams up. It turns out that where 200 gram records came from was the attempt on Classic's part, and I think we were successful at making the most authentic Blue Note records possible. And of course, that involved, Bernie Bebop Grundman, as he's also known, cutting from the original masters and all the stuff that we now know about. But we wanted to make a groove guardless record because original Blue Note records, people probably don't know because they're incredibly expensive. They don't have a groove guard on them. And so we had special dies made. And actually, I took an original, I don't remember which it was. It wasn't, a super valuable record, but I took an original Blue Note from the 50s and I weighed it. We cut it in half, like Gary's talking about. I just showed you that UHQR from the original JVC plant. And we got the profile, and that's what we had made. And it turns out that those records were 200 grams. So that's the origin of 200 grams. It was in that attempt to make a 200 gram record. Roll the tape forward a few years after we started doing these authentic Blue Notes, and that UHQR Gary had, which came from Classic, he cut it in half. And guess what? Not only did we find out that UHQR records were flat profile records, we also found out that those records weigh 200 grams. So
one of the things that we found also, Mike, and you remember this, I'm sure, is those original Blue Notes being mono. It was much easier to press with no groove guard. The trick was once we got the stereo, and we had to develop back pressure to fill the groove. That's when it became tricky. How do we get a flat profile at that point? So
yeah, we tried to use the same dies without any groove guard to press stereo records. And Gary can explain a little bit more than me probably, but effectively it comes down to, with mono records, and by the way, Grundman and I set up a pure mono cutting system to cut all those Blue Notes. So they are absolutely mono records, plain and simple. And they only have horizontal modulation, no vertical. So the height of all the grooves is the same, right? Because you don't cut stereo cuts up and down as well. So when you press that record and the vinyl's flowing, it's easier to fill when all the valleys in between the mountains, if you will, are the same height. But when you get to a stereo record, now you've got both modulation horizontal, but also vertical. And so sometimes it's really hard, and I think Gary explained that pretty well, to fill. So the groove guard, which the original JVC pressings had, provides just a little bit of what Gary called back pressure. When the vinyl gets out to the edge, it sort of holds it so that it doesn't all squeeze out, if you will. And so that allows for more vinyl to fill in those sometimes very complex modulations, of which he referred to as Kind of Blue. The intro to Kind of Blue has got a blast in it that is legendary to try to fill on these classic parts that Grundman cut. And I'm glad to hear that it turned out really well. These pressings are dead silent. Compared to this original 6-eye copy that's in mint condition of mine that I told Fremer earlier, I played, it's noisy and it's absolutely stone mint. I opened that record new. And these pressings from QRP of this latest version are dead silent. They're amazing. You guys have done an amazing job.
Yes, dead quiet. And I had a guy over here yesterday who he's a huge record collector and a very wealthy man. And he's had every version of Kind of Blue there is. And we compared the 45 RPM single-sided records, all of your various versions that I have, which are only 3 of them. And this UHQR is clearly better in every single way, especially the quality of the transients. They're so clean and so clear, and the black background and every aspect of it is better. If you want to hear what's on the tape, if you want some kind of wash and some sort of luxurious wash of noise and of tube rush, maybe the original pressing will be your thing, but if you really want to hear what's on the tape, this thing is clearly the best that I've heard yet. And the guy that came yesterday said, I never heard some of that stuff, and I've had every copy there is of it, and I played every single copy of it, and he was just absolutely blown away. And then we took his original Ellington Uptown, which was a green label master work, and we played it, and the top end was so bright, it was like you couldn't listen, and I put it on the demagnetizer, which completely, he thought that was complete nonsense, and we played it again. He goes, I get it, I hear it immediately. But of course, unless you double blind tested, it doesn't exist. And so, Bernie, how do you ever master anything without double blinding everything you do? I don't understand it. I'm being facetious.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
What, Michael, do you see some more questions that,
Yeah, somebody wanted to ask, and it's a good question. How do you QC one of these records compared to a black record? It's very difficult to see the grooves. So what's the process?
Well, you saw a minute ago, if you were looking at the video in our packaging department, that vinyl, this formulation of the clarity is a little bit easier because there's some transparency to the vinyl that we didn't have before. It was a fairly opaque clarity vinyl. Actually makes the defects pop out a little bit more, but at the same time, at the same time, these people are we have 3 people in packaging, 2 ladies and a man that check all these records before they go into the jacket. It takes 5-10 times the length of time to go through these, and you know, not that we aren't aiming for perfection on the SMTs, but we're kind of going for that next level, like label defects that we might pass on another record. We're not going to pass on these. It takes a long time, and there's nothing easy about it.
It's good that you're showing all of this because people don't really appreciate what it takes to get that record to them when they open the box and they see the sticker on it and the shrink wrapping and all this takes time and energy and effort for people to do all this one at a time. It takes a long time. The other thing is that you didn't discuss, I think is really important. We talked about flat profile, but a lot of the newer vinyl people don't understand the implications of what it means to have a flat profile. They can't see that if you do a cross section of a record, the stylus is actually going downhill till it gets to the center of the record, and then it's going uphill till it gets to the end of the record. Whereas on a flat profile record, that cantilever is remaining perpendicular to the record surface the whole way across. And there is a sonic benefit to that people should understand. Also, every press that's made sounds different. You could take the same stamper and press it on a 2LX Alpha and press it on an SMT, or press it in one of these fine bills, and they will sound different. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's a fact.
It's true.
Everything makes a difference.
Everything.
That's definitely true. You know, interesting, when we used to cut way back in the 90s for Hobson, he used to cut 3 sets of masters, one right after the other. And then he would get test pressings. They all sounded different.
They all sounded different. It was the most maddening experience.
Crazy.
Just the plating, the who knows what, cycle time, all these factors. So that's what's nice about nowadays with the newest technology and so forth, is there's more and more consistency coming into the product.
Yeah, you still find those ones that you liked the most back in the 90s, Mike. That's still what we're using. We have all 3 cuts still, but
yeah, it's kind of like timeout. Anybody try to outdo what you and Bernie did on timeout, it's like me trying to start a fight with Mike Tyson. You know what I mean? They're just going to embarrass themselves, you know?
Yeah.
It's just...
So, Chad, the ultimate the question that comes to mind immediately is, so when are you going to do Brubeck on UHQR?
Well, you know, I better leave that one out. You know, we requested it, and we've heard different little things, but
we'll hope.
Supposedly they were going to the state, but we haven't. But you know, we'll see who ends up doing it. But all I can say, if it isn't us, they're gonna have a. You know,
people are reissuing some of the records that we already reissued. And if the consumer takes the time to A/B, I just say, listen to our records.
Mm-hmm.
Compare our records to other records, whether it be another reissue or the original, because we try hard. I mean, I've got the 2 turntables and I have a crisp, smooth mastering console where I can turn the volume. You know, you got to get the volume right, because it's hard to A/B if you don't have the volume right.
Correct.
And it's hard to remember. Now, if one kills the other, it's easy. It's when they're close that it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But you put the volume at the same, then you switch back and forth, and then you also have to live with it. Listen to the whole record.
Yep.
Because sometimes one will sound better as you switching, but it might not be livable. You know, it might be fatiguing. This is what we do with every record. Just like sometimes Bernie or somebody will say, hey, I want to send you the lacquer so you can listen to it before I said, no, I want to go ahead and plate it. Because normally, you know, whether it's Ryan Smith or Kevin Gray or Bernie or Doug Sachs, when they usually knock it out the park and beat the original on the first time. But sometimes they want to send me the lacquer so I can listen to make sure that they're doing the right thing. I says, no, go ahead and cut it. We want to plate it and go through. Because a lacquer sounds so awesome that it can mess with your judgment on how something's going to sound. I said, I want to listen to the finished product, the way the customer's going to hear it. Let's go ahead and spend the extra money, the extra time, because, hey, chances are it's going to be awesome anyway. We already have the part made. And so, you know, all of this stuff makes a difference, man. And these are specialists that have dedicated their life. Bernie's been doing this since she was 18, right, Bernie? Or close?
Well, maybe not quite that young, but I mean, I was an audiophile all through that period, of course. All my money went to audio equipment and to you know, records and so forth. But I didn't really get to work in studios and stuff till I was 25.
Well, we're gonna do a whole video on that, but not live. But we'll do. But I've got plans for, you know, I got some plans for the YouTube channel. But basically, what I'm saying is Gary has spent his entire life basically in this business. Learning his craft, mastering his craft. There's very few people too. If something happens to Gary, I'm SOL, man, because there's very few people that know what he knows, and he needs to start training somebody. You know, same with Bernie. I mean, you know, and we're all getting up there. I just turned 59. So, you know, Michael spent all those years pushing the limit. Bernie spent all those years. Gary spent all those years. Me and Hobson and Michael Ludwig spent all them years listening. And, you know, and I do feel that even though I'm not an engineer, like Bernie is in a way the last ears to hear the product. He knows what the consumer wants to hear. He's going to make it sound, you know, listenable and lovable and, you know, like it's, and then I'm going to maybe work with Mike Hobson, or me will kind of work with Bernie. Like, man, usually 9 out of 10, they do what you want without you having to tell them what to do, because you don't even really know what to tell them to do. Just get out the, like Bernie gets out the way of the master tape. You know, I get out the way of Bernie, listen to what he does, compare it to the original, kind of send him the original to begin with, and then, you know, man, this was awesome, but boy, if you could do a little of this, you know, okay, well, let me try that.
Yeah, that's the process. It's a process. It continues, you know. It's a kind of back and forth thing, definitely. Always has been. Same way with mixing anything.
And I mean, you know, the consumer, that's why all of this YouTube stuff is so great. We can finally show people the sausage factory, what goes into it. A lot of people won't show this because their pressing plants are dirty, and they're not. There's nothing for them to really be proud of. We're proud of what we do. We spend everything we earn going back into it. Every time somebody buys an album from Acoustic Sounds, we reinvest in trying to upgrade. When Gary says, "Hey, I want a back center that costs $75,000," I can say yes. So,
and you know, Chad, what is the best thing about YouTube? You can answer or ask silly questions like, when will we see Led Zeppelin on UHQR?
well, I've only seen that question a million times, and I never thought of that though. I don't know, Fremer, do you think that maybe if we did Zeppelin, they might sell? Like, I don't know. I was thinking about doing Pablo Cruz.
Chad, I remember the first time that Hobson did Led Zeppelin, and the records were $30, and people were saying, "I'm not spending $30 for a copy of Led Zeppelin. How dare you?" And now, if you want that record, it's $300. You can buy Jimmy Page's remaster, which is a horrible, horrible sounding record. But if you want one of the classic records of Led Zeppelin, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So this is the golden age,
and it's worth every penny. It's worth every penny.
Golden age. I want everybody to remember that. And when something comes out that you want, get it now. Don't complain about it, because if it's gone in 5 years, it's not going to come back so quickly. Get it now.
And I think that's so great what you just said, and I think this UHQR release of Kind of Blue, for me, as a relatively new guy who's back into vinyl, represents this golden age of vinyl. This release with 25,000 copies represents exactly this new golden age of vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And no digital version's ever going to sound like what this record sounds like.
Exactly.
Ever. This is
never.
If someone's complaining about getting a bad pressing, listen, nobody's perfect. There are going to be examples of that. But for the most part, these are coming off and they're going to be so quiet and so clean. You hear this record, it's fantastic. It's don't miss it.
Yeah.
I'll review it.
If you get
tomorrow.
a defective record, man, it happens. We'll replace it. We get some people that freak out, and we can't make every record perfect.
No.
We can. There's a saying in the pressing business: making a good record is not hard. It's making them all good.
Yeah.
That's hard.
That's the thing. That's the difficulty.
It's all about
consistency. Is difficulty in everything, in everything.
Let me talk about what's going on right now in the pressing world. Like we did a buttload of the Love Supreme for the Acoustic Sounds. And just so you know, a buttload is a little bit more than a shitload. But we did a buttload of Love Supreme. It took 5 months for them to get the jackets back in. Okay, now we got new releases we have to do on this Acoustic Sounds Verve series. So they're not going to put that in front of a new release. Plus, the same label owns the Beatles. So you talk about a dilemma. Take Abbey Road off to press, Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, it's a dilemma. So when a lot of these records aren't out of print, but if let's just say you didn't buy it the first time, you're going to have to wait months before it ever goes back on the press. And there's people that the new word I hear on the web is the flippers. And I don't have anything against a flipper because it's supply and demand. If they buy it and they have it and you want it, you're lucky someone has it if you don't want to wait for it.
Yeah, but not if they start with their buying bots, and that's not.
Yeah, the buying bots, well, make more records. But
Chad, I visited MCA's pressing plant in Gloversville, New York in the early 90s when they had a pressing plant. And then I heard they were going to close it. The pressing plant made money for MCA, which, you know, is the precursor of Universal. It made money. It employed 60 people in an area that was economically depressed, but they decided to close it. And I spoke to the people at MCA and they said, do not close that pressing plant, because what's going to end up happening, vinyl's going to make this big comeback and you're going to have to get online with everybody else to get your records pressed. And they looked at me like, you're crazy. Get out of here. And that's just what happened.
Sure.
Hey, I have one quick story that Bruce Fadine was telling me when he was working at Universal in Chicago. He was, when stereo tape machines first came in, he told them. Universal Recording
Company, not the
Bill Putnam's studio.
yeah.
And he told the record company, he says, hey, I think we ought to do these sessions. We don't have stereo records or anything yet, but I think we ought to record these, like Duke Ellington, people like that. We ought to record them in stereo because we know, I think it's coming. And they said, and the record company said, no, I don't think there's any future in it. We don't want to spend the extra money. And so what he did was he ran a stereo machine. So he has a library of stereo copies of recordings that have never been released in stereo of these big bands and various people like Ella Fitzgerald or whatever.
Chad, get busy.
Right, yeah. I'm thinking Bernie. Couldn't you tell me about that offline?
I have no idea what happened. You know, he passed away a while back, and I'm not sure where all this stuff is. He has all these vintage microphones. He has, you know, I have to talk to his wife.
Well, I guarantee you somebody's gonna find it before the end of this webcast.
Yeah.
But isn't that the way it happens though? There's no future in it, you know?
Well, hey, you know what? He was thinking ahead, and there is a lot of cool stuff out there like that. And but so yeah, the whole thing with the YouTube, just as the sensation of vinyl is just growing and raving and growing so fast. The same thing with YouTube is happening, and so we're able to show people how this is done. We're proud of what we do. These are all humans behind it, you know. So, you know, if you get one defective record, man, it's not the end of the world, man. We'll send you a replacement, you know. We're trying our best. Yeah. We are really, really trying our best. We think we're doing pretty good, you know. And it's because of Bernie's, you know, 50 years of history, what Hobson did, what Gary's done, and it takes a bunch of professionals that are really dedicated to the art. And a lot of these people are behind the scenes, you know. They're working hard. Gary don't talk much, man. He works, and he's not talking, he's doing. And so
there's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do, man. And
a lot to do.
And I keep
Are there any other questions that anybody has?
Yeah, questions.
There was one question from Norman Maslow, and he asked, and I remember that too, you are still doing them on 200-gram vinyl, but there has been the news from Acoustic Sounds or Analog Productions that you don't do 200-gram anymore. Or does it only affect the UHQR?
We're just doing the UHQR on 200 gram.
Okay.
Because what's happening is we're so busy pressing records that we can't, we have 150 titles on our own label on back order. Our own label. If I press a record for Joe Schmo Records, we make like 30 cents profit on that. You know, maybe 50 cents. I don't know. It ain't much. Like somebody told me before we got in this record pressing, there's not a lot of profit in manufacturing. You know, they break extruder screws like toothpicks out there. They're $3,000 a piece. You know what they say when they break an extruder screw?
Oops.
Oops. Who said that? Mike? Well, there's three mics. Oops. So, you know, we're doing this. Basically, we started the Acoustic Sounds financed QRP to press our own records.
Mhm.
But when the Hendrix comes aboard, then, my label takes a second. This might be a long answer. I'm sorry if it is. You ask a question, you're going to get an answer. We're second in line at our own pressing plant. Then the Beatles want us to press. Well, shoot, that's great. It's a good problem. So now we're third in line. So we're trying to, making 200-gram records, we make less of them because there's more defects in them because they're harder to make. So consistency, you'll hear in the press, it's all about consistency in the record pressing business. Consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And the 200 grams aren't as consistent, as the 180 because they're harder to make, they're slower. And if our whole pressing plan is 180, then we don't have to think, well, that's Chad's record. It has to go on this press. It's more consistent. We can make more records, and they're great. You know what I mean? They are fantastic, and they're more consistent. We can make more records, and we reserve the 200 for the UHQR. Now, Gary might be able to explain what I just said differently or in a way.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'd add is a 200-gram record off of an automatic press is a much different thing than a 200-gram record off of a fine belt.
Yeah.
Being able to pull it off by hand, placing the biscuit by hand, there's a lot of these automated things that are taken out of the mix. There's an amazing amount of possibilities of things going wrong on an automatic press, and the heavier the weight, the more those problems manifest. Just the grippers pulling the record out in an automatic press, catching that vinyl, the excess vinyl that comes out the edges. We don't have that problem on the fine belt. It's a much different beast. It's I'm not going to say easier because we've had to come up with a lot of I'm not going to say innovations, but different ways of doing things on the fine belt versus the SMT. But in for lack of a better way of putting it, it is easier to make a heavyweight record on the fine belt.
So then you create the next type to get the old 200-gram version.
Yeah, we just, Gary, I'm in here beating Gary every day, man. We need to make more records, We need to make the best records. We need to make a consistent record, and he's like, all right, well, we make 350 of your 200 grams in an 8-hour shift, and out of the 350, we have to recycle 100, and plus we have to know how to if all the presses have the same dies in them, it's not, the scheduling isn't this. And hey, I made an executive decision, and there's more records out there because of it. And there's a reason not everybody makes 200-gram records. And the reason is damn hard. And it isn't just that there's a little bit more, 20 grams more vinyl. That's probably the cheapest part of the difference, where people, they're trying to save money on vinyl. No, that isn't, that ain't enough to worry about. Because we spend a lot of money on, we're of the belief, if we break even and we make something that blows people away, then we still did a good thing. And so it was a hard decision, but we didn't really hear much about it, and if people really knew everything I just described, which, again, I think Gary could describe all of that even better, or he knows intimately everything that I just said. I mean, he's the one dealing with it. I come in here with a scowl on my face, wondering why there ain't more records being made. Why? And he's got to break it down to me in a way I can understand.
And that's the answer. And I hope, was it clear?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it's clear. Yeah, we understand.
Chad, can I indulge myself and play what I said on the radio in 1988? Can I play that for people about vinyl?
Oh, that thing you must have took some speed.
1 minute. Yeah, I'll play. Okay, do that.
All
Let me
right,
do
go
that.
ahead.
Good way to wrap up.
So this is what I was on the radio on WFMU, which was a college station in New Jersey in 1988. I hope this comes out okay here. Let's see.
One of the things I do, folks, is I write for a high-end audiophile magazine called The Absolute Sound. This is a commercial plug. It's a very sophisticated magazine. It's a lot of fun to read if you're into audio. A lot of people aren't, but it's serious audiophilia. And I would like to tell you that you may not have heard this, but the compact disc is the greatest single mass deception since the election of Ronald Reagan. This is the truth. There isn't a serious...
I'll stop there, but there's more to it than that. And then I went on to explain what's going to happen in the future, and I was correct, but I said it was going to happen in 4 years. It took a little bit longer, but here we are.
What year?
What did Ronald Reagan do to you?
What year you put that out?
I'll tell you.
What year was that?
88.
1988.
Yeah.
Like I like to say it, man. Fremer was country before country was cool, man. He was vinyl with it. He used to they'd put him on CBS Today Show or NBC Today or whatever.
NBC.
And then they'd get these engineer type people, like really, really smart engineers,
like me,
talking specifications and stuff that I know I can't stay in the same room when they start talking about that, all the specifications of, and Fremer went toe to toe with these guys, man, on live TV.
When I was on the Today Show, showing people how to transfer their records to cassette, that's what I was hired to do. We used Kind of Blue, and I sat
hysterical.
I sat between Bryant Gumbel and not Katie Couric, it was whoever she. Anyway, some woman, and I was told, because I was doing this for TDK, and the deal was I was supposed to go and say, when you do your transfer to cassette, use a good quality tape like TDK, and I hold it up, and I did that all over the country at the local stations. When I got to NBC, they said, no product placement. You cannot hold up that tape. And the publicist said, you must hold up that tape. And it was like, what am I going to do? So I'm sitting there in between, Bryant Gumbel and we're talking about records. And I'm saying records sound better than CDs, and, keep your records. And then and when you transfer your records and it was like that scene from Animal House, do it, don't do it. The thing on the shoulder. I'm saying, when you transfer your records to cassette, make sure you use a good quality, like TDK. I got it.
Did you do it?
I did it, and everything.
Did you record? Do you have it recorded?
Someplace I have it on a Betamax tape or something, but it was. I was so nervous. Oh, you have no idea, but I did it.
Find it. Let's put it on YouTube.
And then Bryant Gumbel said, "Stick around after the commercial. We'll talk some more about records." And I came back and talked some more about records. I got my points in. So
did they say anything? Did they get on you about it?
No, it was fine. It was all good.
I want to show this. Show off. I'm gonna be a show off. I collect records too. This is when you mentioned the original Kind of Blue, because I think I watched that thing and I remember you pulling out might have been even Time Out, but maybe it was Kind of Blue. But this is a white label promo of Kind of Blue, and I got it from the guy. You remember about 30 years ago, they had a guy that would say, "This is CBS." Like they showed the logo of CBS.
Yeah.
The eye, and this is CBS, or you're watching CBS, and it sounded like God talking to you, And that guy sold me his record collection, which was about 10 different Miles Davis white label promos.
Nice.
And I think he got like a royalty every time he said that, like a penny or something. But I'm sure he's passed on by now. I forget his name, but anyway, maybe a few more questions, and then we can
get back to life.
Yeah, I'll let everybody get back to life. How many people was watching? We had about 1,000 people watching live. I mean, that's a good amount. That's a damn good. And I want to thank Bernie. I really want to thank you because
Me too.
Yeah, and Michael Hobson, Fremer, and Michael Ludwig, we love your YouTube channel, man. I mean,
I don't know why. I don't know why, but I felt like I was surrounded by legends. Don't know.
Well, so what were we gonna? Oh, a couple more.
Any other
questions?
There was one nice question, Chad. There was a question: do you plan on expanding?
That's
Not your weight, Chad. Your present plan.
I just made an offer yesterday for a 63,000 square foot building.
Here we have our answer.
63,000 square feet on a 7-acre property. Okay. Is that the answer? I just made the offer.
I guess so. Yes.
Now, we just bought 35,000 square feet a year ago.
Okay.
An extra 35,000 square feet. Now, thank God I'm in Kansas. If I had to buy that next to Bernie Grundman's studio,
Yeah, forget about it.
or next to Mike Hobson's house, or Michael Fremer's house, or even any of y'all, if I had to buy that property where any of y'all on the screen live,
Couldn't do
I'd
it.
still be in my bedroom.
Someone just said that the guy that sold you those records from CBS was named Don Robertson, and he just passed away.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Don Robertson. Wow. Hey, call Don. Thank you, Don. That was an awesome voice you had. But hey, if his widow's watching, call Acoustic Sounds if you got any more than records.
Very
You're
good.
shameless,
Very
I'm
good.
sorry, that was tasteless, but
You're shameless.
he had some good records, man. And I talked to him. I meet a lot of our customers. I have some cool customers, man, all over the world doing everything. Friends everywhere. And I feel bad about like spanking anybody out there about buy now or cry later. I'm really doing you a favor because we're going to sell out. It don't matter to me. It's not if we're going to sell out the 25,000. It's who gets it.
Yeah.
Who gets it?
Yeah.
Not if they'll be gone. Who will get it?
Right.
Agree.
And
Very good.
Forget repressing something if it goes out of print or not. It's hard to get it back on the press.
Yeah.
So the best, we can't get Love Supreme back on the press. We could press. I mean, people are begging for it, and they're selling it 2 or 3 times the money on something that just was pressed a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, buy 2.
I'm keeping.
Yeah, because the sealed one is worth even more.
What's that?
The seal.
The sealed one is worth even more.
There you go.
The numbers of what's selling that I'm hearing from some of the labels is crazy. I never would have expected the kind of numbers I'm hearing. I mean, big numbers. That's why there's.
They miscalculated. They didn't realize the public wanted physical media also. They wanted something physical. They wanted something that connected them closer to the artist. It's almost like an introduction to the album when you look at the album.
Yeah.
Whereas, why do you want just a playlist somewhere?
Yep.
You know? I mean, it loses so much of the experience, the whole size of the experience.
Yeah. I always said,
Well,
if kids get to hear it, they'll want it. Especially in this whole digital era, everything they have is digital. If they get to hear a record, they'll want it, and that's what's happened. You know,
Yeah.
I said this. I spoke to a distributor who tried to get 10 Audio-Technica turntables to sell. It took him like a month to get them. He tried to order 10 more, and the distributor said, "We're back ordered 17,700 turntables." Story.
I'm surprised this wasn't one of the questions, and maybe it was. Everybody, what's next? What's next?
Yeah. What's next?
All I can say is, I wish it was who's next, but all I can say is this. Save your money and put on a diaper before we make the next announcement. Okay?
I'm wearing a diaper now.
and Bernie's gonna get this job. Okay, Bernie's gonna get this job. And he knows what it is, and I hope it. I'm gonna have to pay him extra to keep his mouth shut. But
I think we have to keep your mouth shut, Chad. That's what we're gonna have.
Hey, that's the hardest thing.
It's coming. Chad's giving it away any second.
I know. I can't. I mean, people are calling. You know, when's the kind of? If I mention some of this stuff, our lines are going to be lit up. All I could say is save your money. We want more UHQRs, more UHQRs. You need to do them more often, more often, more often. We love the UHQR, and there's going to be some more. And we're talking top. Because to me, to be a UHQR, we can't just pick any title, man. It's got to be a kind of blue. You know what I mean? It's got to be a Hendrix Access Bowl is Love. It's got to be a Hendrix Are You Experience. Did I just? I mean, I didn't say that. You know, it's got to be.
I told
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no.
Listen up.
Yeah.
It's got to be
Something historic. Something historic.
It's Milli Vanilli. We know that, Chad. It's
yeah,
Milli Vanilli. We're gonna do that, and what else? Yeah, so there's more to come, man. We are so excited. We just can't do it fast enough. I'm sorry. And I know deep down our customers know quality takes time, quality costs money. Deep down they're willing to wait and they want to wait, but it's a good problem because they're excited. It's just sometimes I get frustrated. I hope people understand. I try to explain what it's like being in my shoes because I get frustrated. And I don't want to beat people up, but it's all a good problem. It's all a good problem. But I want them to hear if a record comes out that you see you want, or you're in a used record store and you find this record and you're like, man, I should get it. Just get it. Because the moment you put that thing back in the bin, it's gone. And the moment you don't buy the Love Supreme, the best is another 6 to 12-month wait. And so, but you see, the reason is I get these calls, you go, Chad, man, you got one of these things laying around? You know, shit, I have a pressing plant and I ain't got it laying around. You know? And I got a lot of friends these days, you know, hey, man, you got one of those Access Bowl is Love?
All of a sudden, they're your big friend.
Oh, yeah.
Right. and they really are. They really are. And they would be a better friend if they bought it when it came out.
Yeah.
How about that?
That's it.
But hey, that's all I could say is buy now, cry later. We appreciate the masters. Bernie, man, you're a legend. We're going to do a YouTube video on some of the things you've done. We're going to talk about contemporary. Mike Hobson, I appreciate you helping us grow and pushing the envelope, pushing me to do better. You know, Fremer, you've supported this since the beginning. You and Hobson, and you know, a lot of Johnny-come-latelys. I mean, we're going to welcome them to the party, and we appreciate them. But I know who was there when people were running, okay?
Yeah.
Everybody was running from records. Let's not bullshit. Hobson remembers, Fremer remembers, Bernie remembers.
Yeah.
And now they're coming back. That's fine.
Yeah.
But Hobson was there. Fremer was there. Bernie was there throughout all this. I think I was there because I started this in 1984 when the vinyl first came out. And and what's happened is just, I would have never predicted. I knew, like I said, I knew vinyl would never die.
Yeah.
But I didn't see CDs dying like it did.
Yeah.
And I never thought that it would get to this level. We also want to thank Michael Ludwig, this YouTube sensation. You know, I like his style.
Thank you.
He's cool. He goes through, he ABs his records. He's also mostly buying new reissues. And I'll tell you, I love originals, and I'll buy originals, and it's hard to beat good originals. It's hard to beat Bernie's original. But we can do it, and Bernie's done it, and we try our best to beat him. And so, like Michael Ludwig's whole collection is the latest reissues of the Blue Notes and the great records, and so he's come in lately, and he's bringing it to a whole new audience. Oh, last thing, the question: why do Kind of Blue again? Why do Kind of Blue again? It's been done. Do another title. Do another title. Do Tupac Shakur. Do another title. Hey,
Tupac.
Yeah. You know, the reason is, first of all, it's the arguably the best jazz album, best sounding, bluesy. It's great. Okay. And there's a lot of people that don't have it yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
There's a new audience that does not have this record yet.
At least not
You know, these people that make all these posts, we don't need it. Yeah, you don't need another one. Okay, you don't need another one. That doesn't mean there's thousands of people that don't have it already. We're bringing this to the new people. And if we blow them away with analog vinyl, it's just like, you know, it's just like drugs. It is like drugs, but it's a pure drug. And
It's not harmful.
It's not harmful.
No,
it's music
harmful.
to you.
It's harmful.
To your
It's
walk.
music to your soul,
Harmful to your
but you'll
wallet.
get addicted. You
Harmful
know,
to
because
your
it's
marriage.
you give them the best stuff, and you got a customer for life.
That's right.
You sell them these crappy records that some people are doing, and they're gonna go, well, what's all the fuss for, man?
Mm-hmm.
So we're bringing the ultimate to the new people, the young people. You know, they're just turning on to this, man. And they're the
Well
new
done,
guys.
Sean.
They're going to keep it alive. So
Yep.
we're doing it for them, and we're doing it for the guy that wants the ultimate. And I think there's going to be 25,000 people that we made it for.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Sounds good.
Gotta go.
Hey, thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much.
Okay.
Great to see
Thank you all.
everybody.
Bye.
Everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.